Talking about erectile dysfunction isn't easy. Most brush it off or blame themselves, saying things like, I lost my mojo. Or people make excuses. I had a long day at work. Sorry, honey, I'm just not feeling it. Guys, with Roman, it's easy to talk about. With a real healthcare professional who can prescribe real medication, it's simple, safe, and totally discreet. With Roman, you get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. A healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan. If medication is appropriate, Roman will ship it to you with free 2-day shipping. The whole process is straightforward, simple, and discreet. Getting started is just as easy. Go to GetRoman.com/Chael. Complete an online visit. Go to GetRoman.com/Chael today. If approved, you'll get $15 off your first order of ED treatment. Suga Sean was talking about how many fights he has left with the UFC. I want to say he said a couple. Loves fighting here. This is where he wants to be. Not completely against the idea of free agency. He would like to see what that number is. And then he made a comment, I do love to box. So we're sitting there and we're kind of piecing all of the things together. And I always feel as though Suga Sean is a little baby step ahead. Maybe not 2 or 3, maybe not playing a full game of chess out there, but I do feel as though he's a little bit ahead, and I think that that's what he's doing here. Now, I'm guessing, but we've never seen a public negotiation go well. And on a different week, it's the same topic, different guy, and now it appears to be Sean, but Sean is way too smart to be doing that, which is why I think he's up to something different. Look, Sean has something beautiful. It's placement on a card. It's very relevant that we know that, because with getting a placement of a card, main card, co-main event, main event status, and he could go either one of those. They could plug him in anywhere. He's going to be on the bigger and featured part, which is what a lot of 135-pounders do not have and why they would want and seek Sean out. Now, I know that I'm stating the obvious, but it is important that we understand this because very few guys bring anything to the table. A guy that's going to bring a main event or better to the table is the champion. He's got the title. There's just places that these are going to be contested. So the one thing that Sean has, which is placement on a card, the risky business here is that could be taken away. It isn't a guarantee, like, say, a champion who's coming in to defend, something along these lines. Now, I do not imagine that anybody would think that Sean O'Malley should slide down to an undercard. But there are reasons where he could, in this world of placement, do exactly that. So I think that Sean is having a little bit of fun. I think that Sean is getting stuff going, but he does create a conversation. It's the one that I want to have with you right now, which is, when is the time and the place to be negotiating when you're already under contract? And there's a number of ways that guys go about this and you just don't see it, right? Everybody wants to come out publicly. You'll remember when we even had to live through the money fight era. Who do you want to fight? And instead of calling for a champion, they would have the money fight. I want to wherever the most money is. And Sean talking about maybe going into boxing and starting to spill over. Look, I'll just share with you what Kamaru Usman is up to right now. Because as I stand back and I look at it, I feel as though Kamaru is doing this better than anyone. Which Kamaru, just like everyone, also negotiates publicly. He also wants more participation. Hey, how much do you want? More. Okay. But Kamaru doesn't hold anything up. Very relevant that you understand this, because everybody that works a gimmick ends up marking out for their own gimmick. As human beings, we are whoever we pretend to be. So when you go out and you start doing interviews each day, you forget over a very short period of time, wait a minute, that was part of what was gaining me headlines. That was part of what was getting me clicks. That was part of what was creating a dialogue and a narrative, which is a domino effect in one interview, thus getting me more interviews. Same thing with a social media tweet. It's a theme, it's an angle, but we will forget over a short period of time, wait a minute, that was for attention. That was the act. Over a short period of time, we forget where the person begins and the material ends, or vice versa. I don't believe that Sean would be falling into that realm. I just don't. I look at Sean, wildly popular, beautiful record, main card guy. I see him get placements on shows. I was at it. It was Adesanya, the night that Nate Diaz fought. They were in Arizona. They panned to Sean. The crowd goes crazy. And by the way, he's in the front row, right? There's something very special there that I don't believe anybody would be foolish enough to give back. Particularly in this respect, which is if you have a title, you're coming into a title fight. I'm stating the obvious, correct? But if what you have is beautiful card placement and there's nothing securing that spot, I don't think that Sean would be foolish enough to, in the midst of trying to get his next match, start doing this publicly. I just don't think that's what he's doing. I think Sean's great at getting everybody's attention. I also think that Sean has shown us, and maybe reminiscent in his very last fight, where he took on that gentleman who'd never even been in the organization before. Most guys would not have the courage that Sean had to put a risk like that up against such an unknown. Now, I only suggest that for you because when we have this evidence that Sean is willing to take on anybody, including or lesser known guys, including on late, short, next to no notice, it tells me that he's willing to play along. I like what Kamaru Usman is doing. Do you guys understand that example that I just gave? Kamaru Usman, like everybody, is speaking up and wants more participation. But while he's doing that and his phone is ringing and they're asking him to do something, he doesn't hold him up. Kamaru continues to say where he would like to participate, but he doesn't hold him up. He says yes to what their ideas as well. So it's a very unique spot because when guys start to mark out for their own gimmick, then all of a sudden they take their ball and go home. They pull that big emergency brake. They stop everything from happening. Those things are not going to be forgotten, ever. And there's no other course of the industry that works that way. Imagine you got a guy in your marketing department, and he wants to go talk about his agreement and his contract. Well, you don't have time to sit down and talk with him, so you're eventually going to do that, but that's going to be 3 weeks from now, and we'll go grab a cup of coffee together, and we'll hear what you have to say. Now, let's say the guy in the marketing department is right, and you agree with him, and you acquiesced, and he gets some kind of a bump somewhere. Imagine if in the interim, he stayed home. He skipped a couple of events. You can't just forgive that. You can't just forget that that happened. The guy has to be showing up every day, pushing forward while still having a subsequent conversation, which may or may not go his way. And I just submit for you, that's what Usman's doing. I'm just bringing it to your guys' attention. Usman doesn't slow anything down. You can't have hard feelings towards him. He didn't give you anything to have hard feelings about. He created a conversation while continuing to move things forward. Hard to be upset. I'll leave you with one final thought as it has to do with Suga Sean, because again, this is a new athlete. Today it's Sean, but next week it's going to be somebody else with the exact same argument. The week after that, so on and so forth. Be very careful when you're picking your promoter. And one thing that Sean had said, he talked about the boxing, but he also said, checking and finding what is worth out and going out on the open market. Be very careful when you sit down with your promoter and you decide who you're going to go with. If you are a pure whore and you are going to the highest bidder, you're looking at your career wrong. And if you sit down and the one thing that you have to tell the promoter who is seeking you, and all that promoter can say to you in response is, well, I'm going to give you more money than this guy. If that is his only plan, it's not one. And that's a great opportunity for you to sit down, for you to see what avenues, what exposures, what directions he intends to go with you. If he tells you, I'm going to pay you more money than the next guy, it's not a plan. And it's something that you always want to look at so that you can be strategic. And one thing that Sean has always left out, which is why it's the number one thing that tells me that Sean has a plan here. The number one thing that Sean O'Malley leaves out is who the next opponent's going to be. Most people in Sean's spot that have a pulpit and have a platform are going to point their cannon and point their whole fan base in one direction. Sean always leaves that out. Sean always keeps you guessing. Sean talks about Sean, he talks about the beautiful things, but he never locks himself into a corner, which makes me think that Sean is just a little baby step ahead of everybody else here. So before we all get frustrated and throw our hands up in the air, and we do that with guys, right? It's Sean this week. It's going to be somebody else next week. It was somebody else a week ago. If we want to go back and search it out, having the same conversation about how much they're worth, and they're going to take their ball and go home until they get it. I don't believe that's what O'Malley's doing. I think he is picking his time. I think he's aware of the beautiful placement. I think he starts to see that I got a few guys coming after me instead of me going after them. I'm going to frustrate them. I'm going to antagonize them. It's very different strategy Sean has, particularly because he has not yet drawn an opponent. How do we know what a fight's worth? Only been 2 fighters in the history of the time could sell on their own. Mike Tyson and Oscar De La Hoya, and I think in all fairness, you'd probably have to open that door up to Conor McGregor and even a Floyd Mayweather by now. Everybody knows you have to have the full fight. Sean's leaving that out. I think because Sean playing a different game.